should look familiar. It is, I think, the thumbnail for the first video about stepping back. Everything in my body is going to come together into my center and then explode out to the side. The cat stance obviously is not a fighting stance. It's very cool looking, but you never actually execute anything from here. It's a transition stance that helps us remember we can't simply step into an unknown weapon. We can't simply lead with our foot and have our center follow. Everything needs to draw in, and then it can move out. So as we're moving, let's think about two body mechanics. We have back at mass, and we have rotation. We're not turning to a full forward bow, but our hip is still turning. Like the first technique, we could execute this focusing on back at mass, or we could execute this focusing on rotation. And then, of course, ideally, when we execute it for real, we do both. This one we have our first true double motion. We have an outward block, and we have a reverse punch. This outward block is not super strong. Most of our blocking techniques have a major, and then a minor, the block, and then a check, and this just leads with the check. Kenpo is more concerned about this than any other martial art I've practiced. Taekwondo, Shotokan, both have that sort of basic outward block, and you have hikite, or this returning hand that sort of opposes it, but it's not an actual block. So they're okay with using that as a block. I think Kenpo is right in that if there's a hand coming at my face, I would rather block it with my tricep extension and my shoulder and my lats and my chest and my core and my front leg bracing all of that than to hope that like just my shoulder and lats are enough, especially because like that shoulder motion is not very strong. But that's why we have the double strike. We're on the inside again. Their hand is here. Their other weapons are here. We have to stop that hand, but more importantly, we have to stop those weapons if it's something like that. So that block is really just a check, and this is my block. This is the thing that stops their weapons from actually hitting me. You might have noticed, as I'm executing this, that I have a tendency when I'm doing this sort of thought experiment kata to shuffle on that strike. This is for a couple of reasons. One, I'm just trying to think about back at mass, and two, I'm thinking if there's an application for this, and they're giving me a big hook sort of combo, if I block that hand that's moving at my face and I punch, I'm not actually hitting them. This has to be driving in, and really I would want this to control things here. So I shuffle to tell myself I'm pulling into them, even if it's a defensive technique. If it's an offensive technique, I'm using that rotational motion to maybe drive their hand to the side. So again, facing off here, that opening gives me the punch. In essence, this could be a modified horizontal blitz. I'm using the back at mass of the blitz and combining that with hip rotation to make an actually useful technique for sparring. And in the first tournament where I actually placed in sparring, I won my first place fight using that technique. It's still one of my staples to use that opening motion to knock their hand across their body, canceling their other weapons, and drive that in. Just to clarify, that defensive application is on the inside. Hook punch is coming, block and punch. The offensive application is on the outside. Hands are up, moving their arm across their body and punching. Before we go to the next technique, I do want to think about the cat stance in the middle of the block punches as its own technique. Part of literary studies is cultural history, and part of being a cultural historian is pooping all over everyone's dreams. So martial arts are not thousands of years old. They're all connected to each other. They're like maybe 100 years old if we're talking judo. Most of them are in fact younger than that. There's a technique in Heian Yondan, the fourth Shotokan form, where you move up, side kick and back elbow, then an elbow. That same technique is in Taeguk Oh-Jang, the fifth Taekwondo form, where you block, kicking back knuckle, elbow. The same principle is applying here. I'm not saying this comes directly from those forms. Taeguk Oh-Jang definitely comes from Heian Yondan. But from here, we're loading everything up. We're moving everything out together, and we're thinking about how we land with all of our force instead of 1, 2. It's all together. Again, even though Kenpo is not related to Shotokan in the same way that Taekwondo is related to Shotokan, that principle is about the same timing in terms of the belt rings. Now you learn to step back, you learn to block. Let's learn to do multiple things at a time and land with our full body behind it. Yeah. Use all your body mechanics.